Hi, my name is Craig Hollenbeck, and I teach AP Comparative Politics at Eden Prairie High School. And this is the international side of apps that I teach with my colleague Brian Sibley. He teaches AP United States Government, and I cover AP Comparative Politics internationally. We study 6 countries in this particular course: the United Kingdom, Russia, China, Mexico, Iran, and Nigeria. And we do a bunch of comparative work. We have done an introductory unit already on international political systems, terminology, concepts, and so forth. And now we start in on our country studies, and there we go through electoral systems and political participations, how legitimacy is fostered and frustrated. We talk a great deal about authoritarianism versus democracy, as well as globalization, the political economy, and the modern political history and current goings on in each country. It's a great course. Your kids are going to learn so much. I trust they already are. And it's just such a great opportunity for them. So I hope they talk about it at home. I hope they can bring in some current events that are going on. And I appreciate you taking the time to spend a few minutes with me here on the video, as I was unable to make it to conferences for one of our 2 nights. So I apologize for that. That's me, just as a visual. And this is my 20-something year, 23rd year at the high school, 22nd, 23rd year, 13th at the high school. And it is absolutely, and I sincerely mean it, it's a pleasure and it's a privilege to stand in front of your kids and work with them every day. They're just an amazing group of young people. And so I just want to say thank you, because the students that I get to engage with, it's just an incredibly gratifying thing. So thank you so very much for whatever you're doing. Keep doing it. So the countries that we study, and it's a whirlwind tour here, but just to give you a brief overview, and then I'll go into some of the nuts and bolts about the class. We start with the United Kingdom after our introductory system, and it has been chaotic and hectic, to say the least, for me to try to keep up with what is happening and keep it current for the students, certainly. So we've had the whirlwind with Brexit. We have had 3 prime ministers in 3 years in the United Kingdom now. Boris Johnson is in trying to engineer Brexit, and so we're keeping a close eye on that. Your kids have learned a lot about it, as well as what's happening with all of the British institutions, Scotland, Northern Ireland, the troubles between Catholics and Protestants, recent elections, and the political trajectory of the UK. Really, 1979 and onward is the focus there. Vladimir Putin in Russia is a bit of the gift that keeps on giving for this course anyway. He's been the man in power since 2000 in Russia, and he's been one of the constants in this class since I started teaching it 13 years ago. So we do a day on the USSR. We transition your students to see how the USSR democratized and moved away from authoritarianism with the Russian Federation in the 1990s, how they moved to a semi-presidential system, terrible decade in the 90s for the Russians, and then Putin grabs them and drags them up, centralizes power, authoritarian methods, becomes much more statist in what they're doing. And so it's an interesting unit, and your kids will be, he'll be very memorable for them in an awful lot of ways. So super interesting, like I said. Speaking of super interesting, there's Xi Jinping, the Chinese leader, and he is becoming more and more long-term all the time. He's done away with term limits in China as the president and general secretary, and so he's a major current player globally that your kids will get to know. I love the Chinese unit. I think it's so interesting. We study the Chinese really from Chairman Mao's era, beginning in 1949, work our way through his death in 76, and then the 1978 liberalization period with reform and opening began under Deng Xiaoping. And then to see how those pragmatic policies lifted hundreds of millions of Chinese out of poverty. It's been a staggering thing to watch in China for the last 40 years. And to watch this country now try to maintain its principle of economic liberalization without moving toward political liberalization, maintaining the centrality of Communist Party rule. It's an ongoing experiment and so fascinating to watch. And we talk about a great number of things in China that are in the news. Certainly Hong Kong, roiled in protest yet again. We will continue to watch that, but it's just so interesting as far as a unit goes. Sorry, I'm being repetitive that it's all interesting, but it is so interesting. Iran, we talk about the theocratic republic. We really begin a little bit with the Shah's era, but we hit it hard starting with Ayatollah Khomeini and the Islamic Revolution and how they came to be and how they've transitioned. And the balance of positions, the secular versus the elected, the religious versus the secular versus the religious, the elected versus the unelected, all the factions in Iran. Iran is so gray, and it's so often in American society we see them as a monolithic single entity. And it's just not. There are so many factions in Iran. It's such a vibrant, interesting country, and I think your kids learn so much about it because of the nature of the different types of institutions that we will expose them to. Mexico has a new president, or relatively new anyway. That's him, Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador. So he is the latest Mexican president, serving one 6-year term. It's one of the cool things about the class. Your students get to see this and make comparisons. So Russia's president, 2 consecutive 6-year terms. Iran's president, 2 consecutive 4-year terms. Britain, no term limits for the prime minister. Mexico, 1 6-year term, the sessenio, and then they're done. We talk a lot about Mexico post-independence and how they evolved in the 19th century and then through the revolution, but we really focus on the era of pre-hegemony with the dominant party for ever so long, 71 years of dominance, and then the transition to multi-party Mexico as they move toward that after 2000. How they've tried to combat the drug violence that's endemic, democratic transitions being challenging, to say the least, at times, and the drug violence again off the charts, and it's unfortunate for our good neighbors to the south, and how the state is going to try to combat that. Nigeria is the last country we will tackle. That is the president, Muhammadu Buhari, who has been the president since 2015, winning re-election in 2019. We start really with Nigeria in 1960 when they got their independence from the Brits, suffered through an awful lot of military dictatorships and coups throughout the years, tons of corruption, just a staggering amount of diversity in terms of ethnic groups, religious groups, linguistic groups, and so on. So very, very difficult to achieve national unity, and that's been Nigeria's challenge, and continues to be so as they try to evolve and combat Boko Haram, amongst other things. So the course itself, I have a ton of resources for your kids, and so this is really that, the previous few minutes was kind of an overview of the class and what we do. This is super important for your kids, and so I'd really love it if you could check and make sure that they're using all of these things. I give them an assignment sheet for each unit that details the readings that they do. They do get chapter readings that I give them. They're Word docs that we don't have a textbook because it's 6 countries. Everything gets outdated right away. Along with the chapter readings, the kids get a reading review sheet, and this is just an example of the one that they'll be using, and there are like 70 questions on it, but this is just a shot of the first page. These questions they are responsible for from the readings, and so they need to be aware of this. I'd encourage your kids to look at the reading questions for each section before they do the reading, so then they can either take notes, they can highlight, they can annotate, whatever the case is going to be. I give the kids a learning target sheet for each country that we do. These are Russia, or it's the Russians when we do it as a 4-day unit. It's either a 4-day unit or 5-day, but this is a 4-day where it gives your kids the big ticket items, and for each country they have to be able to do this, and some plenty of higher level things here where you're talking about analysis and you're talking about things like that that your kids have to be aware of. So the learning targets are really, really important. I give the kids their an addendum handout called the Comparative Politics Manual. And at the center of that, for each country, there we go. This is an example of part of the Russian one, and it's there's an outline on the impact of the past for each country. There's also an outline for the key institutions, and this is the section on the presidency, and it's a bulleted outline of things that I think they should know about the Russian presidency, and it gives the kids a big overview in all the other sections of the outlines as well. Please try to make sure they're using that. That would be great. I give them key terms for each country. These are the terms they're responsible for in Russia. Those 58, there will be more than that, but those are all imperative that they know. So there's a key term sheet for each country as well. I give them a ton of options on Schoology. There are AP reviews that we will utilize throughout each country. The screencasts are really, really big, and they're short videos of me. They're 5-minute hitters. They're just like what I'm doing for you right now, except that they are content-based, and they are very, very helpful for your kids for review. I hit the big topics and reiterate what we did in class. And it can be really, really a lifesaver for your kids. The notes are on Schoology for every unit because I want your kids to be able to have those and not have to scribble them down the whole time. And then I provide some practice quizzes, other elements. This is from the UK unit for your kids to utilize during the course. Review sessions before the exams all the time, and I have a Twitter to keep your kids up on current events. It's a great way to keep current. Grading wise, for the course assignments, daily work is 10%, the assessments are 90%. It's a challenging class. Admittedly, it's a college class and it's difficult. It's poli-sci. Your kids aren't used to poli-sci, so it's a new animal for them. They will succeed, and it's going to be tough going in the intro part of it, and then they start to bump themselves up as the term goes along. Retesting is allowed on exams if it's done within a 2-week window, and please have your kids take the AP test. We do very well on the AP test in this class. We have more kids take the Advanced Placement Comparative Government and Politics class at this high school than any other high school does in the country, so we enjoy wearing the big foam finger in regard to that. As far as studying for exams, I think that your kids really have to, because this is what they'll struggle with a little bit. If it goes beyond a definition. So if we're talking about economic liberalization as a term or concept, we're going to want them to, yes, be able to define it, but then apply it, as in who implemented that policy in a given country, how was that done so? What were the effects? And then you move on and say, okay, well, if Thatcher did that in Britain, how did it work in Russia when Yeltsin did it, and so forth. So lots of comparisons there. This is a good slide for just what your kids can focus on for studying for tests. It's a lot of what I've gone over already, the 2 outlines, the reading questions, the class notes are enormously important. The learning targets, the key terms, using screencasts, and I still will say current events are a really, really important part of it. We love teaching apps. That's me with one of my classes last year. It's that every other day thing. This was the activist from last year, and some of your kids are activists this term. It's a family thing. We try to make a big school smaller. We have a lot of students who take this classes, and so they have us every other day. Mr. Sibley has one crew for AP Gov one day, and I have a crew for AP Comparative. Then they flip the next day and make the switch there. So it is a class that it's a term grade, but they don't get a grade until the end of the semester. We love family. We love experiences. We really try to push the fact of the kids that we want them to have great experiences and make it more than just a class. We do great political philosophy discussions with what are in our salons when we use Glenn Tinder's political thinking, and we push them to do some things and go out into the community with some extension work that's a required assignment, and your student has a handout on that. So Um, it's a great class. It's just such a pleasure to teach it. Your kids are amazing, and I'm so fortunate to be able to do this. So thank you. Feel free to email me or give me a call if you have questions, and I'll be more than happy to talk with you. And thanks again, and I look forward to a terrific semester.